So these are the 3 emperor penguin eggshells that were collected on the 20th of July 1911 by Apsley Cherry-Garrard, Henry Bowers and Edward Wilson. Edward Wilson had already been to the Antarctic on the Discovery expedition, and on that expedition a man called Reginald Skelton had come back with emperor penguin skins which had been collected at Cape Crozier. So this is one of the 3 emperor penguin chicks that were collected on the Discovery expedition, and it was these specimens that alerted Edward Wilson to the fact that if he wanted to get an emperor penguin egg at the right stage of development to get the embryo, then he would have to go in the middle of the Antarctic winter. The immense hardships the men endured were chronicled in Cherry-Garrard's book, The Worst Journey in the World. The conditions are unimaginably hard. It's dark all the time. They don't know what time of day it is. They're just constantly either walking and pulling the sledges, or they're trying to set up camp and get a little bit of rest. They're getting frostbite even within their sleeping bags at night. The temperature becomes so low, the ice crystals didn't melt beneath the runners, and the friction was so great that they had to untoggle the sledges and take one forward and then walk back and go and pick up the other one. So for every mile that they were walking forward, they actually had to travel about 3 miles. Wilson was prepared to risk all because he believed that developing chicks inside the egg would throw light on how birds evolved. According to a Victorian theory, by studying the embryos of an organism, it was possible to learn the evolutionary history of that species. It was thought that the emperor penguin were the earliest offshoot of birds, so the idea was that if they could just get hold of an emperor penguin embryo, then they could provide evidence for the link between reptiles and birds. After 3 weeks of hell, the men finally reached the emperor penguin rookery. They managed, after several aborted attempts, to get down the cliffs to get to the emperor penguin breeding colony, but that in itself was far more difficult than they'd ever anticipated. Remember, it's dark, they can't see what they're doing, and they managed to get down. They slip down through these cliffs, holes in the cliffs, get to the emperor penguin breeding colony, and they manage to get 5 eggs. Now unfortunately, Cherry slipped and broke 2 of the eggs, so they now have 3 eggs that they very carefully put into their fur mitts. The journey back wasn't any easier. Bowers fell through a crevasse and was luckily saved by the leather straps which attached him to the sledge. On the 1st of August, 5 weeks after they'd set off, the men finally returned to the hut at Cape Evans. There's a fantastic picture that is taken just after they'd got in, and that shows quite how badly they looked at the time, having suffered so dramatically for the 5 weeks that they've been out. In spite of their heroic efforts, by the time the research was published 23 years later, the idea that penguin embryos were the key to understanding the evolution of birds had largely been dismissed. The most important thing about the 3 specimens which remain in the Natural History Museum collections is that they show the lengths to which people have gone to try and answer scientific questions and add specimens to the collections. It isn't always easy to go and collect a specimen, and sometimes in the past it was extremely difficult.